All right, Brent, we finally meet in person.
We do.
This is fun. We're at Fanatics Fest 2025, New York City, Javits Center, of course, just like last year. And, loyal listeners of the pod will know who you are already because you've been a guest multiple times. And it's funny. We're going to talk about cards later, but I want to get your thoughts on the whole event. I thought you didn't come last year, but you did. So you can compare 2024 to 2025. Any differences, any similarities? What do you think about the vibe?
The first thing that stands out to me is how cards are more mingled into the show.
Yes.
Instead of cards being on the very end of the show and feeling a little separate from the show.
Yeah.
It feels right now like depending on where you enter the show, you're immediately have cards in front of you. Yeah. Whether it's Tom Brady's card vault, whether it's Fanatics Collect, whether it's the tables that have cards set up. It feels like you can't miss the cards. Yeah. Even on the other side of the show where there's not any card tables, right. There's cards for sale, there's cards being displayed. Also, the card museum downstairs is really, it is.
Yeah.
If you want to know what Apex cards are, you go down there and take a look at the LeBron James. You take a look at the green PMG set that's down there.
Yeah.
There's the Jordan green PMG, which I don't think I've ever seen in person, so this is my first time seeing it in person.
Right.
Just amazing cards.
Massive, the Ohtani Superfractor, which I think
I saw a few of those in there, yeah.
Yeah, one of them sold on the Sotheby's auction. That was had a lot of publicity because of Fanatics.
Yes. Well, what I think is really cool, too, about that green PMG Jordan that's down there is I believe it's authentic altered. So it just shows that when a card is really special, the grade doesn't matter at all, to the point where it's just having that card. I don't care if a kid put a little green marker on it or trimmed a corner, it doesn't even matter. It's like a Honus Wagner.
Yeah.
Just having the card is meaningful, and that's how I love to collect. So I appreciate that sort of thing.
I'm going to segue right into it. I was going to save it to the end, but every time we talk about scarcity over grade.
Yeah.
And I love how you kind of always tag me on
Yes,
examples.
I love it. Yeah.
What's the latest one that you tagged me on? The Trout.
Oh,
the gold,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so there was a 2009 Bowman Chrome Gold Mike Trout in an 8.5 that just sold for $19.5 on eBay. And then I took a look in a blue to 150 and a PSA 10 sold for around $40,000. So you could have bought two of the golds to 50 and the 8.5 for the price of one PSA 10 blue and to 150. Yeah. And so it just always, I just love when you did that video a while back of, imagine if we're kids and we're opening 2009 Bowman Chrome and you're opening a box over there and I'm opening a box over here and I pull two golds and you pull one blue. And you convince me that your blue is in better condition than my golds and we trade. Uh-huh. That's essentially what's happening right now in the sports card market. Yeah. So it just always catches my eye and it just makes me feel like a little kid and playful about it. So I love sharing it with you.
And I love the examples that because it happens time and time again.
Oh,
that's the thing,
constantly.
Right?
Yeah. And so one of the things I try to help newer collectors coming to the space is, if you're collecting vintage, if you're collecting the 70s and 80s, before coming back into this hobby now and you're not used to having serial number cards and parallel cards, back then grade was the only thing that made a card rare or scarce. Exactly. Now it feels a little bit like double dipping when you already have a card numbered to 5 or to 50 and it's already rare and scarce. Yeah. And then you're going to overpay for a grade on a card that's not as rare and scarce because it's in great shape. Yeah. So the complexity is fun. I love the complexity in modern collecting, but it can also be a little confusing for somebody because somebody coming in, for example, that Mike Trout, they see PSA 10, serial number to 150, that's a great card. But what I always recommend to people is when you see a high grade card like that, look and see, is there a parallel better than that you can get in any grade? Right. And so I would have advised that client that paid 40 for the blue Trout, hey, what else could you get for 40? Could you get a 9.5 gold for 40K? Let's look and see, is there an Apex card higher up on that parallel chain that you could actually get versus overspending for a grade on something that's not as rare or scarce?
Exactly. And I feel like it's just every time you come onto the pod, we'll keep talking about this until people start to learn, right? It's like my co-host Hyung. He, for the last 4 or 5 weeks on our pod, he always brings up Aaron Judge as undervalued. All the attention's been on Ohtani, of course, deservedly. But he's going to say, I'm going to keep bringing this up until people see that Judge cards are so incredibly priced, relatively speaking. But anyway, I love how you talk about scarcity over grade, which reminds me, and I don't think I have asked you this question before, but I've done IG polls about one of ones. Okay, so the scarce of the scarce.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on grading one of ones? Because one of one obviously is just as scarce as you can get, as rare as you can get. But with everything you just said, do you need to add an element of grading or is it for other reasons you would grade a 1 of 1 for?
Well, I think a lot of this comes down to short term versus long term.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll get an argument from somebody saying, hey, well, I understand your strategy, I understand rarity and scarcity, and I get what you're saying, but the market doesn't seem to care sometimes. The market seems to just pay whatever for a PSA 10. And I always say to them, in the short term, I think that's probably true. That could be okay in the short term. If you're just buying a PSA 10 so you can resell it quickly because it's easy to resell, and you don't have to wait for somebody like me that's seeking rarity and scarcity in any grade, then it can make sense. But over the long term, that more rare and scarce card will always, I believe, will always end up being the better long-term play. And 101s, if a 101 grades a PSA 10, there's usually a premium over a 101 that grades a PSA 9. It's hard in similar players because you can't compare it to itself because it's one card. But what I'm saying is if it gets a 10 and it's a 101, there seems to be more excitement around it. I personally don't care what the grade is to some degree as long as it's not bent in half or a chunk of the corners missing. I love when a card's super rare and scarce like a 101 is a PSA 6 or PSA 7 because I know those guys are just seeking grade, might steer away from it, and I can get the card and get a great card. So I think you should always grade a 1 of 1. And, I like it because if it's not a PSA 10, then it gives me a better chance to get it for a lower price.
Okay, so anyone with a 1 of 1 should grade it. So if it's a lower grade, Brent's going to take advantage of that.
Yeah. But if it's a PSA 10, you will get a premium for it.
Brent's out of that, but someone else will pay for it.
I will avoid a PSA 10 101 a lot of times just because, I don't want to pay that extra premium for it because I don't really care what the grade of it is. It would be like the green PMG Jordan. Would you really care if it's a 7 or a 5 or a 4? I wouldn't really care. So
makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good point you make. A lot of people are more in it for the short-term timeline.
Yeah.
So they're like PSA 10 or nothing.
Right, because they'll even tell you it's easier to sell a PSA 10.
Sure.
Versus, like I bought a red Bowman Chrome Mike Trout rookie that's the 5. I'd never seen one before, and it was a PSA 8. I was happy it was a PSA 8 because I didn't want to pay a premium for a PSA 10 grade.
Yeah.
And so it wiped out a lot of the demand side because it wasn't a PSA 10. Yeah. But I know it's the 5 and it's one of his best rookie cards. So I can come in and take advantage of a situation like that. And now I have a card that you never see that, nobody else can get.
Yeah, no. Again, so going back to the card show and kind of tying this all together. Yeah. Have you had a chance to look at some of the cards that are out there and anything catch your eye?
I did have a chance to look around. There's a lot of great stuff out there. The museum downstairs was just like...
You got to check it out. It's
good.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's good because you get a chance to see what are true grails in the hobby. What are those true incredible cards that are rare and scarce that you cannot ever get your hands on. Yeah. And then you go out onto the show floor and it gives you an idea of when you're looking at just thousands and thousands of cards everywhere, which cards should I really be focused on? If this is my end goal to get into that green PMG Jordan, should I be looking at a green PMG in football set? Is there an opportunity to get a Marshall Falk and a green PMG for 10 or 20 grand, knowing that those Apex cards are green PMGs and Jordan's anchoring that set? So there's a lot of great cards out there, but that museum collection really kind of throws you off a little bit because when you're seeing super fractors of LeBron James, it's hard to go out and look at a 2003 base chrome rookie of LeBron James on the show floor. But there's a lot of great cards out there.
Yeah, and some of those cards in the museum, it's what I find fascinating is that it used to be in someone's normal everyday collection, and now it's in a exhibit essentially.
Yeah.
And think about 15, 20 years down the line. The things we're collecting now could be in one of these showcases.
So that's exactly what I was trying to get at, and you said it better than I did, around have that mindset. What type of cards do you see in 10 or 20 years being in that museum? What types of cards do you see in 10 or 20 years headlining a massive premier auction? Those cards that just make you stop. And are you collecting too many cards when you could be collecting fewer, more special rare cards? And so I think that museum can just be a good, opportunity for people to walk through it and just get a feel for what are true great cards. Because sometimes I feel like there's too many cards right now that have value, if that makes sense. Right. There's just no way thousands and thousands and thousands of cards of a player can have so much value. Yeah. So that concerns me a little bit because I believe over time the Pareto distribution will kick in and fewer cards will have more and more of the value over time for any given player. So I try to focus on those cards that I think over time will continue to have more of the value. Just like art, very few pieces of art have all the value, and most art has very little value. So I try to think about that with cards.
It's like essentially you got to see through the hype, because a lot of these cards have value currently because of the hype, because of the awesome breaks. And I love seeing a lot of super fractures get hit. We joke about how many one of ones are out there these days, but what card actually matters for that player.
Well, and it's exciting too, because if you can catch a player on a run, and if you can buy the card at the right time, and they have 2, 3, 4, 5 great seasons, I mean, you can have a lot of fun holding that card, watching that player, checking the box scores every day. Were they 2 for 4, 1 for 4, 0 for 5? You feel like your card went down in value. So like that can be a lot of fun, and it's a thrill because there's a lot of people, and like say if you're betting on sports, you just see win or lose. If you buy a sports card, if the player doesn't do well, you still have the card. It's not going to be worth 0 the next day, versus like a bet, it's worth 0. Like if you lose. So
yeah, and that applies to fantasy baseball. I used to be a hardcore fantasy player, and then when I got deeper into cards, I had less and less time for fantasy. And like just more researching the cards. That for that reason you just mentioned, I like to hold and just kind of root for that player.
It's fun. Right? Yeah, like right now, I'm on pins and needles all the time, paying attention to the box scores of Julio Rodriguez, because I have his Bowman Chrome Red to 5, and it can be stressful. I'm always checking to see how many times he struck out today.
I feel the same way about Mike Trout. Like, please hit another home run today. But
I know. I love that he's playing again, and he's semi-healthy. He's just in New York right now, and he had a home run yesterday. So
sweet.
Yeah, he's playing well.
I didn't catch up on the box score, but I love hearing that. Last thing I want to ask you, and we're talking about it off the air, but Fanatics Fest is unique in the sense that you just don't have a card show, you just don't have card collectors, but you have, obviously, we've seen a ton of diehard sports fans, just fans of particular sports. How do you see Fanatics Fest or events like this kind of introducing those sports fans to card collecting? Do you think that even in the next few years, the hobby will see a significant increase because of events like this?
Yeah, I believe that it's introducing sports cards as part of an overall sports culture. Like if you notice when you go out there, how often would you be able to be buying a sports card and then have Jay-Z up in his nightclub next to you? And it's like, it's a culture, like having First Take being filmed here, with Stephen A. Smith. Like it's just bringing it all a part of an ecosystem instead of being so isolated as just a card collector. It's a sports fan. If you think about, I meet a lot of people that either came from sports betting into card collecting, or they came from fantasy sports, like what you're talking about, into card collecting. And there's so many things that sports card collecting can play on within that. You can feel like you're getting a little betting on a player going on. You pay attention to the box scores like fantasy baseball. There's a culture aspect to it, so I believe that it's making it so where sports cards aren't just so isolated where, you're in a basement collecting by yourself and nobody knows what you're doing and they think you're weird. I'm noticing sports cards, they are, anytime I share with somebody about that I collect, they're genuinely interested. And they always tell me, this looks like art. Like a lot of people aren't used to seeing a card with an autograph and a game use patch on it in a slab and, being shiny, and they see it and they're like, I get it. Like this is cool. And and it's serial numbered. Most people have no idea about that. So I think a show like this will just introduce more and more people into it. It doesn't take that many people to come into this hobby and have it grow. You get a few whales of CEOs that decide they want to start collecting, and they throw a few $1 million into the hobby pot, and it can change things quickly.
I'm excited about the potential for all the reasons you stated, and I think it's still early because, to your point, I have a group of friends that still have this old image of what card collecting is. It's like, you do that? Okay, that's cool. That kind of look.
Well, and also if you think about like if you wanted to get into collecting art right now, like where would you start? And so one of the things I like to help clients with a lot of times is, there's so much complexity in modern collecting. Like, where do you start? Which kind of cards do you buy? A lot of times they have no idea the difference in a sticker auto or not sticker auto. They have no idea in the difference in a faded auto versus a bold blue bright auto. Game use patch versus player worn. Which sets are the sets to collect? What's the likelihood of a player ending up becoming a Hall of Famer versus the hype? And so where I can come in and help people is just making that complexity easier for them so they don't come in and just, lose a lot of money on sports cards really quickly by buying the wrong cards and not understanding the complexity. So I love to help people with that so they stay, because I want to keep them in the hobby. I want them to stay in the hobby. I want them to buy the right cards, get excited about it, and then I'll just, you know how it is. Like once you get hooked into this hobby and you don't mess up a lot at the beginning, like we all do a little bit, but if you can stick around for a while, it's really sticky. People tend to, like, as soon as they get ingrained into it and they start coming to shows like this, they don't want to stop collecting. Because then you start making new friends. Like you today, this is the first time I've met you in person. Immediately when I was walking down here, I was like, oh, there he is. Like it felt like I knew you.
Exactly.
But we've never actually met in person, and that's something that card collecting can bring too. That fantasy football never brought me when I played that. You know, sports betting never really brought me that kind of culture around people and making new friends. And, you know, we would have never met before. So it's really cool.
I agree 100%. As you just heard, Brent is doing God's work by, you know, like educating people. And in some small way with our podcast, we're doing the same. But I agree with you 100% because, you know, I said that we're still early where, you know, in terms of the growth of where the hobby could be, but it is growing. Like I'm seeing that growth more and more each day. I came here with a friend who has never been to Fanatics Fest, got reintroduced to the local card shows all within a few years. And now he's like loving it, you know? So, Brent, you and I, one person at a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do our best to grow the hobby together. So, Brent, it's been a blast. Glad to meet you in person. I know you're going to be on the pod later. You know,
I hope so. I always consider it an honor to come on your pod. You guys, like I've said before, was one of the first podcasts I started listening to when I started finding sports card podcasts. And like I said, you guys talk a lot about baseball, which is cool. And at the time, there wasn't very many podcasts talking about baseball. And I've always felt like baseball was such an anchor of this hobby and this community. Some of the most passionate collectors that I run into that buy cards and then never sell them are baseball card collectors, you know, so it's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.